Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
I'm Saul Malek, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
If this is your first time here, thanks for checking it out. If not, thanks for coming back. I'm Tom Gentry, and this is The Path to Authenticity. Episode 221 for August 10th, 2023. Features a conversation with a guy named Saul Malek, who is a recovering gambling addict, a student in a master's program at Southern Methodist University, and a gambling addiction advocate. Connected with him on LinkedIn. Had a chance to have a conversation with him for the podcast. Had an episode earlier this week and then re-released an episode last week, but before that, it had been a few weeks since I released a new episode, and just want to let you guys know I'm kind of going to put a pause on this podcast. I have a few more episodes in production that I want to get wrapped up in the next few weeks and get out to you guys. And I have some other things I'm working on. So I'm going to hit pause here with The Path to Authenticity in the next month or so, and I'm sure it'll be back at some point, and I have other podcast content that will be coming out on this feed, but I'm just working on some other things. And if you've missed the show, I appreciate it, and got plenty more to come. So hope you enjoy this one with Saul. So here you go, Saul Malek. Thanks for coming, man. I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really grateful to see your response on LinkedIn and, your effort to make this happen.
Well, as I was telling you before, this is a topic that I feel like I've really wanted to address on the podcast. And part of it is because just sort of where I am in my life right now, I'm consuming more sports on TV than I have for a long time. And, I grew up in Indiana and, moved back about a year ago. And I'm happy to be, that's kind of what you do in Indiana, So I'm a Pacers fan. I'm a Chicago Cubs fan. I'm not a big NFL guy. If I'll follow the Colts when they're good, more Notre Dame football, Indiana University basketball. But so it's been really great to be home and to have all that stuff in my local market and to watch it all the time. And I've noticed it's really remarkable to me how many ads I'm seeing for sports books, DraftKings, MGM. I mean, there are just tons of them. And it's not only with sports, it's all over the map. And there's so many famous spokespersons now. Jamie Foxx, Kevin Garnett. I mean, I'm sure you can name a lot more than I can, but as someone who I'm a recovering alcoholic, come from a 12-step background, have had many friends over the years who, even if gambling wasn't their primary compulsion, a lot of times it was a secondary one. And I've just seen a lot of people get in trouble with that and other process addictions. And for me, it really, it worries me, because what I assume is going to happen, or, I hope not, but in my lifetime, what I've seen happen with pornography has been pretty astounding. With the advent of the internet and especially the smartphone, we just have constant access to pornography, where when I was a little kid, there were like theaters where you paid $0.25 to watch porn for 30 seconds. And it was like a big deal to have a Playboy or a Penthouse magazine. And really my first exposure was more like a video cassette, where you picture 3 teenage boys in a living room, one staring out the front door, making sure mom's not pulling in the driveway, where, it was really, really hard to access. And now you just have it, immediate access to it in your hand all the time. And the result of that I've seen is, as someone who works with a lot of guys, especially, I don't know a lot of guys who aren't using porn all the time. I mean, even if they don't want to be addicted to porn, and it's really insidious. It's happening constantly. There are a lot of people who use pornography all the time. And so when I see all these ads and I see all these promotions where, you bet $5, you get credit for 250 or whatever. And we're just inundated with all these ads. And to me, what it really is just another opportunity for distraction, as if we don't already have enough. And so I fear where this is going to go, and I know guys who make an occasional bet. I mean, I've met those guys. Know a lot more guys who've run their lives into the ground.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
I just, I'm curious to hear about you. What brings you to a place in your life where you're taking a position of advocacy in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, for me, what I think stands out about what you said leading into this question that is so thought-provoking to me, is that when I started with all this sports betting back in 2017 as a sophomore in college, it was something that I didn't really have a lot of, prior knowledge of what I was getting into. And a lot of my friends weren't really doing it. The ones who did it were doing it so infrequently. It was never really a topic of conversation. And when it really came out to my family and friends and so on, of the level I was doing it, and always on a different sports book and so on, I mean, it was seen as repulsive behavior that, was a problem and, abnormal and so on. And now that I'm seeing this stuff on the scale that I am, it's honestly at times infuriating to think that a lot of young people, young men especially, are being led to believe that they should be doing all this stuff, that if they're not true sports fans, or, they're, not enjoying the game, they don't have skin in the game and so on. And so it's like this action that can lead to all this destruction and, debt and broken relationships and so on. It's now being pushed to where, when I've made mention that it could be destructive and so on, I'm met with comments a lot of, "Oh, you're such a Debbie Downer," or, "Oh, we know who lost their parlay last night, haha," like that sort of thing. And that's really been my main motivation, is that I know where it took me. And of course, I'm my own person. Everyone has their own, experiences with different activities and so on. But I know the potential of where this is going, and it just seems like it's falling on deaf ears a lot of the time. And so I think, hey, if I can at least make an effort to get people at least looking at this topic, even if change is 5 or 10 years away, really, I mean, at least start that conversation, because I really can foresee where this is going.
Hey folks, Tom here. I want to take a moment to ask you to subscribe to my Substack publication. The original purpose for creating this podcast was to cultivate an audience for my writing, and I'm publishing now more than ever. I'm sharing free content every week with commentary on personal growth, emotional literacy, men's issues, relationships, and more, as well as audio content for paid subscribers. Please check it out by clicking the link in the show notes or by visiting tgentry@substack.com. So, how did it play out with you? It started when you were a sophomore in college. How bad did it get? And then how did you stop?
Yeah, so that was really my first experience betting on sports games. I mean, I did fantasy baseball leagues with my friends since 6th grade onward. It was a social thing. It actually was how I made a lot of my friendships in middle school through high school. Was we had our St. John's School Fantasy League. And so I did that. I actually dabbled in DraftKings my senior year of high school. And I'd make lineups on hockey and golf and fight, like UFC fights. And I knew nothing about any of it, but it was just a way to pass the time. Although once I got off to college as a freshman, I deleted the app because I wanted to focus on school and I wasn't addicted to it or anything. I got rid of it and just kind of didn't think about it. So that was really how I guess my sports involvement started. But with the actual sports betting piece, as a sophomore in college, I was texted by an acquaintance of mine I went to a summer program at Marist College in New York for like sports broadcasting. And I helped one of the guys there with his fantasy baseball lineups all the time. And he messaged me and said, "Oh, I found a bookie to bet sports on, and I know you're really good at fantasy baseball. So, why don't you hop on this sports book with me and we'll have fun and it'll be great." And what's crazy is I remember thinking at the time, and I vividly remember where I was and everything. It was a Wednesday, September 20th, 2017. And I remember at first thinking, "Oh, that's maybe not like, I don't want to lose my money." I mean, a very rational thought of, maybe not for me, but I figured, okay, well, I kind of talked to myself a little, thought about it and said, well, what the heck? I'll put in $10 on a baseball game tonight that I'm pretty certain about. And, that was how it started, which I think, people don't realize how innocent it is at the start. I mean, it was as if someone asked me, "Hey, do you want to go to the movies?" And I had no real opinion and just said, what the hell, I'll go, sure, and didn't think twice. So I made this bet on this baseball game, and I remember it was like the most absurd thing because, most baseball games are at least 1 or 2 run game into like the 5th inning or whatever. But this particular game where I took the Royals to beat the Blue Jays, my team was already ahead 9-0 in the 2nd inning. So it gave me this belief that I really do know what I'm doing. This was an easy win from the very start. And, I'm a pro at this. I should do it again. And so that was my first bet that day, that baseball game. And because it won and the guy actually paid me over Venmo and I collected my money, I thought, wow, this is insane. This is cool. It's great. I felt so powerful, like this feeling I'd never felt before, being in control, having power, felt like what I'd think a CEO feels like. And so I took that and then bet on football that weekend and won a huge underdog then. And so that really told me, well, I need to do more of this. I need to figure out how I can do more. And I got onto an online account on a sports book shortly thereafter, because at that point I was just telling the guy my bet and he would place it or whatever, and we'd Venmo each other, or he'd Venmo me after the bet finished. But I really just got into it, kind of in that way. Like, I won my first couple bets and I thought, I love sports. I love money. I don't like working. And this is an easy way to make money really quickly, doing something I enjoy doing. And it makes me feel super powerful. Like, now I feel better than all these guys in my fraternity, all my friends who are working hard at school and they're going to be doctors and lawyers and so on. Like, you guys are losers because I can make all that money, the click of a button, just sitting back, relaxing, and so on. And so really it just kind of progressed from there. And I don't think it's the best use of my time to go into every single bet and so on and what happened here and there. But I really eventually just got to a point where I wasn't able to pay off my losses because I was starting to get higher and higher amounts of credit because I wanted to gamble higher and higher amounts because I didn't get that same rush from a $10 bet, a $15 bet. I'd want to do more and more and more. And so eventually, I got to the point where I wasn't able to pay some of these guys. And so I would start blocking phone numbers of bookies and getting a new bookie. I don't know if I need to explain the context of what that is for people listening, but, like a bookmaker, someone who takes your bets, they'll give you credit to place bets. And at the end of the week, depending on how much you're ahead or behind, you'll exchange payment with that person. And so I was bouncing back and forth between all these people that I was owing money to, blocking numbers, finding new people through, various connections, lying to them about my income so I could get credit and then not paying, and then, having to block calls and try to change my phone number and all sorts of stuff. And so I think the last part of your question, because I know there's a lot to talk about, so I'll speed it up here, but I think you'd asked about what made me stop or how it got to like the worst point.
Yeah, both those things. How bad did it get and how did you stop?
What I think a lot of people can resonate with in terms of quantifying how bad it was, I think, is financial. I think that's really an objective measure of the damage someone's done. So, I would estimate I lost about $20,000 to $25,000, and this is all money I didn't have as a college student, and I'm still paying it back. Almost 4 years later, I'm still making payments on that money that I owe all these different people. So there was a financial aspect of it where it all came to this point of just owing all this money. But say at my lowest point in 2019, my clean date in the program is July 18th of 2019. But in August of that year, the girl I was dating at the time at school, had found out that I was not only gambling, I was also like cheating on her at the time. So I was gambling, doing all this stuff. And so it was a culmination of all my behavior, like the gambling mixed in with all this other stuff that she broke up with me. And I thought, well, I don't have any money. My friendships are all severed because no one wants to talk to me. And I don't even want to talk to them because I want to gamble all the time. And now I don't have a girlfriend, don't have any money, I really have nothing, and I still have this compulsion to gamble. So it's like, damn, nothing in my life is giving me any hope. And so I had a mentor that I knew from some of these 12-step meetings that I'd actually been attending. I just hadn't gotten clean, but I had this mentor who I reached out to and said, well, this girl just broke up with me. If I can go clean from gambling for the next 6 months, will you tell her that I've changed and tell her to, take me back and everything? And he sat me down and had this conversation that there was no chance that I would be able to achieve any sort of abstinence or long-term sobriety or anything if I didn't work on changing myself, and that I was very stubborn and running out of hope, and that I was pretty much in a life or death situation because emotionally I was just so bankrupt and very confused as well. My mind was just so out of sorts that every decision I was making was based on fear or, some impulse or compulsion. And that was really the lowest point was, actually a month after I had stopped placing bets, but I was still as they say often in 12-step rooms, a dry drunk. So I just hadn't found a bookie. I didn't have any credit. I wasn't gambling, but my life was still deteriorating more and more. And so I think that was really the point where I realized I actually, no exaggeration, was on the route to an early death, because as my sponsor says, when people run out of hope, then that's when they eventually will stop living. Because if I know I'm not getting any better, then why am I just living a miserable life day after day, and it's getting worse? So that was really it. It was all the emotional stuff and the finances and the everything.
Wow. So, just out of curiosity, so you have abstained from gambling since then, and you've mentioned a few times 12-step involvement.
Mm-hmm.
So to you, are you also abstinent from mind-altering substances?
I don't use, well, depends if you'd say alcohol is a drug, because I would say I drink in a social capacity. I don't use drugs, though, if you're saying alcohol is not a drug. But I drink from time to time, but nothing that I would say is a way to escape or do anything like, try to replace my addiction. But yeah, that's all I would say on that.
Well, to me, I mean, the way you described gambling is what my relationship with alcohol was like.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, over the years, I've gambled a little bit here and there, nickel slots, that kind of, but I also know I've done it enough to feel a little taste of what you're talking about feeling when you made that first bet and won.
Yeah.
The power of that and how intoxicating it feels.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm more, first of all, I don't want to risk money that way. So that's
Right.
kept me from doing it. But I also know I don't see myself as a compulsive gambler, but if I gambled, I could see it happening,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to be mindful of on my end as well with anything.
Yeah. And it's like, as someone who's been sober for a long time, people have asked me, how did you feel about having a son? And do you fear he is an alcoholic, like the genetic thing? And what I've always said about that and what I believe about that is I want him to be able to have a healthy relationship with his emotions, which he does. And, I know for me, the alcohol wasn't the problem. It was the solution for the problem. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if, who knows what would have happened if that never existed. But if I had coping skills, I wouldn't have looked to deal with my emotions, and I wouldn't have had that compulsion to escape myself the way that I did. And so to me, that's really what it's about. Like, I'm not here to say whether or not you should drink. If you're not, if it's not creating unmanageability in your life, then, but I know, for me, I probably shouldn't gamble.
Right. No, it's a very good point, because I'll just say quickly that, that's why I think the whole abstinence date, at least for me, is not so important. I mean, it is important, but I could say, I'm, almost 4 years clean, and then from gambling. But like, what if I'm going home and always drinking, or, being rude to people and so on. So, it's not the whole story.
Yeah. I mean, and, I'm assuming since, you've are working or have worked the steps, which, to me that's the real silver lining to all this stuff, right? we find our way to that, which for me, it gave me a way of life that I didn't have before. It gave me, the most recent podcast episode that I released was about Stoicism, and the guy who I interviewed, that's sort of his life philosophy, Well, I studied philosophy. I grew up in a religious home, but what I could never really figure out was how this stuff applied to me, especially the philosophical ideas, But the 12 steps, those were really practical. I could apply those principles to my life immediately and begin to see results of feeling better about myself, feeling better about my relationships, being able to function more effectively in relationships. It just helped immediately,
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, my work on the 12 steps, I'm about to go over step 7 with my sponsor, and I know it's taken me quite a while, and there were patches where I just wasn't doing my step writing and just kind of cruising along, but I've been back in the habit of talking to my sponsor every 2 or 3 days and, going over the writing and so on, because that is really what keeps me moving forward. It's not about just not gambling, like, dealing with adversity that comes up, because that definitely still comes up. It's just, how can I handle it in a way that's constructive and mature and doesn't it's not self-destructive.
Yeah. I know for me, and I was 23 when I went through all this. So I don't know. How old were you in 2017? What are we?
Oh, yeah. When I started sports betting in 2017, I was 19, almost 20. So I'm 25 now.
Okay. So same age range. I mean, I needed something to really sink my teeth into in life. I needed something to be grounded in. And I think one of the benefits that maybe we don't think about as often, but I definitely have over the years, is I needed healthy guys who were doing that kind of stuff, who were trying to be better people, who were actually trying to be good men. And I got that in recovery. I met guys who were talking about their emotions and talking about what was going on with them and actually really trying to be good men.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally see the importance of that, because I've also had the experience of, not really that I associated with people placing sports bets, but going out and drinking and driving and like, oh, well, you're less drunk, so, you should drive or whatever, things like that. Just encouraging each other to do risky behaviors and justifying it to make it like, oh, we're not doing anything wrong. But there have been people that I've talked to where I have tried to pass something by them and they say, hey, wait a minute, that's doesn't sound very healthy or whatever. And I think, I'm actually really glad to have these honest relationships.
Well, my assumption is that you feel a sense of responsibility to tell your story.
Yeah.
And to have it be heard. Yeah. And that's why we're talking, right?
Definitely. I mean, I think that the more people that hear this, and it doesn't even have to be, it doesn't have to be about me. It's really just the character of me. Any generic male of this demographic that has this issue can relate, hopefully, and maybe get something out of it.
Where do you live? And you're in school. Where are you?
I'm in school at Southern Methodist University doing my master's in clinical mental health counseling. So it's a 3-year program, and I'm about to enter the practicum sequence. So there's a semester of that, and then 2 semesters of doing an internship off campus at an internship site. And once I get all those hours, then I can hopefully, pass the counseling exam and get that license.
So have you looked into where you're going to be doing your internship yet?
Yeah, I'm actually considering, because there's a place where I'm already working as a patient care assistant where I, oversee some of the groups. It's an outpatient, intensive outpatient, and PHP, partial
Mm-hmm.
hospitalization. It's a mixture of that. It's a program for middle and high schoolers that have a variety of mental health issues. And so I've been working there part time now, and they said that, it seems quite likely I'd be able to intern there when I'm looking for internship sites. I haven't fully committed to that yet, and they haven't extended me that offer, but it seems like it would be possible to work there, intern there.
Well, if you want to look at other options, I don't know a ton of people in that area, but I mean, one guy comes to mind in particular who I could talk to who could, point you in the right direction. I mean, to really find a great fit for you, he might be able to help if this doesn't, if it seems like maybe there could be something that would be a little better. I mean, if you're in the 12-step community in Texas, that there's a really rich 12-step history in Texas, and there's a really rich treatment history in Texas too. Mm-hmm. There is, right. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard the name Ebby Thatcher.
Yeah, I've heard that. Is he one of the original guys?
Well, if you read the Alcoholics Anonymous literature and, Bill's story, and Bill Wilson being the kind of the first co-founder of AA, there was a guy who showed up at his house who, while he was still drinking, who he had been friends with for many, many years and drank with. And that was Ebby Thatcher, who eventually became a sober guy in AA and ended up being, I think, the first AA member in Texas. Yeah.
I didn't know he was from Texas. I'd heard the name before, though.
Yeah. He was a Texan, but, there's some, great facilities out there. And, like I said, a really rich history of good, solid 12-step based addiction treatment out there. Yeah. And, but, in my experience, gambling addiction is such a specialty that, to me, it would be desirable to have an intern who wanted to specialize in that.
I would think so too. Sure. You probably don't get too many people that are really directly interested in that.
Well, and now is probably a really good time to be becoming a licensed mental health counselor who specializes in gambling addiction. I think you're probably going to have plenty of work in the next 10 years,
Oh, yeah, without question.
Yeah. So, what was this like for your family to experience?
It was pretty devastating. I mean, I would often hear from my brother. He would text me sometimes and just, check up on me and so on, and say it was really destroying my parents. I mean, first of all, and this is really, I think, the least of what their concern was the financial aspect. I mean, they were coming to my aid pretty often until I really decided to stop. They were coming and giving me bailouts, and they felt that was easier for me to pay them back than pay some bookie who was coming after me. So they would just give me the money to do that. But I mean, I think the biggest issue that it brought to the family was they couldn't trust me for anything. And I know, especially with my mom, who's always been really vocal, I guess, in her support of me, whether it's been with teachers throughout middle school where I'd get in trouble and she would be my advocate, and, she would, I guess, discipline fairly, but she'd always look out for me. And so not having a relationship with me that was honest was really, I'm sure, really, really devastating. And it was just awkward awkward doesn't even really capture what I'm trying to convey, because it was just this really icky feeling of whenever I'd go home to visit, knowing I'd gambled again or I was lying about something. And I just, any moment I could, I'd try to get out of being in the house because I just like couldn't look at my parents and I just felt really uncomfortable being around them. And, there was no way to really enjoy family time because even if I was with them and we were talking about something else, I'd have my mind occupied about getting the money to pay someone or, getting on another sports book or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, they were worried for sure about my safety as well because they didn't know who any of these bookies were that were needing their money from me. And I'm sure they also didn't know if I was going to end up like harming myself physically or something, or just having like a stress heart attack, or I mean, who knows? Mm-hmm. So really, I mean, the effect, which is sort of crazy to me, but it seems true that you could have a gambling problem without ever gambling in your life because your family member's problem has become your problem. Right. And that's what I think is not reported too often about this whole gambling epidemic that's taking place, is that families are going to suffer. It's not just going to be some kid who loses a couple $100 and then, really.
Well, over the last few years, I mean, I have people who are more or less close to me, who I've known all my life, who have come to me to talk about their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time it happened, by the time they were willing to have a conversation about it, man, they had already bailed their kids out many, many, many times, were themselves at the end of their rope financially, and finally at a point where they realized, man, we can't do this. Like, we need help.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's, I mean, it is an addiction, and like other addictions, there's a lot of shame about it. So it's not only the shame that you have for becoming this person who lives this way and this dishonest way, which is, you're talking about how you couldn't live with yourself, not being authentic with your family. They then, they're afraid to talk to other people because they probably on some level even assume there's something they could have done better, or else this never would have happened, and the shame about bailing you out financially when most of the advice they're going to get is to never do that. Right.
No,
right.
I mean, especially I think given the background that my parents have and tried to raise me and, going through private school. And then also my family is Jewish. And even though we're not really religious, I think there is a certain level of expectation with a lot of these Jewish families where everyone's a lawyer or a doctor or this or that, successful. It's like you can't go telling them, oh, my son just sits at home, gambles, and takes our money for bailouts. Like, there's so much shame, I would think, associated with that. Like, damn, we spent all this money to put him through private school and he's amounting to nothing.
Man. Well, that tells me a little bit about how you felt about yourself.
Yeah.
Through this process. That's a pretty harsh thing to say, but I get it. But I, just as an aside, I have to ask, how did a Jewish kid named Saul Malek end up at Southern Methodist University?
No, it's funny you say that, because I guess all of the schools I've been to since 6th grade would seem to be Christian. Like, I went to St. John's 6th grade through 12th, and then Trinity in San Antonio, and now Southern Methodist. And I think really it's just that these are all schools that I've considered to be good schools. And I think SMU has, at least regionally, has a pretty good reputation and a lot of good networking. So they do actually have a Jewish student like Hillel group at SMU.
Oh.
And they had it at Trinity as well. And then St. John's, we had a few Jewish kids. So I think it's really more about the prestige than anything.
Did you grow up in San Antonio?
No, I grew up in Houston and then just went to Trinity for undergrad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you've been in Texas your whole life?
Yeah, actually, that is true. Just moved around the some of the major cities. I haven't lived in Austin to this point, but Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've been to San Antonio, and I've been to the Dallas airport. I've been to Austin a number of times, and I've liked it. You know, I mean, do you see yourself staying in Texas, or what do you envision?
I wouldn't mind it. I mean, I'm currently, I have a different girlfriend now of almost 3 years, and she's looking into different law school options. So I'm prepared to follow her, assuming, once I get my license, I'm able to kind of be flexible with where I go. So I like Texas, but I'm definitely open to kind of traveling around.
Well, there's work, this kind of work everywhere,
I'm sure that's what I was thinking. It's probably a pretty flexible situation.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I will tell you in my experience is, when it comes to addiction treatment, there's a pretty vast difference between treatment and good treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I'm really grateful for is I had an older sister who 12-stepped me. And she happened to live in a community where there was a Hazelden program.
Oh, okay.
So she went through that program, and a year later I did. And then I started my career there, trained as a counselor there. So I got the best, I really it couldn't have worked out any better in terms of how I was positioned to enter the field and be trained. And yeah, I mean, there is a really, really big difference between treatment and good treatment. And so, if there's ever anything I can do to help you in terms of steering you, I mean, I can say with a pretty high degree of confidence that if there's a facility that you want to know if it's any good or not, or if the people there are good or not, if I don't know, I can find somebody who does. And what really matters more than anything else is the quality of the people who you align yourself with. And like I said, I just kind of got really, really lucky to be not only sort of groomed and trained by people who were not only professionally sound, well trained, high level of professionalism, but they were also very ethical people who were doing the work for the right reasons. They
Sure.
really, really wanted to help people. They weren't doing it to acquire wealth, which, becomes a problem because, as if you're someone who's studying to be a mental health counselor, the lens through which you see every decision you make as it pertains to your relationship with the client has to come first. What's best for the client always has to come first. And if there's ever anything that gets in the way of that, it is more or less problematic. Always,
Sure. And I think especially, in this field, it's so murky at times, I'd say, between good intentions and then also just, getting rich quick or something. Because I think there is a lot of potential to offer some sort of miracle cure to people, and people are so desperate because they're suffering so much that they'll try it because they're, willing to try anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's, I don't know, I wrote something a few years ago about like 3 or 4 questions that a family member should ask when they're talking to someone in an admissions department at a facility. And, one of them is, how are you funded? Like, Like, is it a for-profit or is it a nonprofit? And usually those things are pretty telling. Not always, but most of the really stellar, historically, treatment facilities around the country were nonprofits. And it's becoming less true over time because there are more good facilities. But there's still, most of them, even if they are for-profit entities, they're not the source of the wealth that the owners, you know what I mean? They're a labor of love. You know, all the really great facilities that are out there were created because somebody wanted to help people and they had passion for it and they had a really good idea about how to do it, you know. Sure. But there are an awful lot of people out there who, I don't know, I just feel like this isn't something that we should be doing to get rich. You know, I just, like you said, people are at their, a lot of times the people that we work with are at their worst when we meet them. The families are at their most vulnerable. They're dying for help and they don't know what to do. And what's always saddened me is if they consult Google and, you know, and you Google best addiction treatment, like what ranks up to, you're not going to get it. Like that's not, you know, and you could get anybody on the phone and their agenda is to convince you to come there, not to help you get the best help for you. And so I've always really taken that seriously, that my job is to help people get to where they need to go, not where I want them to go, right? Not what suits me. So anyway, just to anything I can do, I'm more than happy to help you. It's good to, I feel like I have a responsibility to do that when I meet younger people who are trying to do the right thing. And you know, if there's something I can do, I want to be able to help. I want to help people connect with other good people and that sort of thing. There's a facility down there that I've referred to a lot over the years in South Padre Island, Origins. And yeah, and there's I know that they have an outpatient program in Dallas, and then there's some great care around Houston too, like really cutting edge stuff. The Menninger Clinic is there.
Yeah, I am familiar with that one.
Yeah. And there's also J. Flowers Institute, which is, you know, this Dr. James Flowers, who's really brilliant, but that's just scratching the surface. I mean, there's a lot of good treatment out there. So anyway, well, so looking back on all this, you know, there must have been a time when you were at a particularly low point and, you know, things didn't look like they were going to work out too well. When would that have been? When things were really at their worst for you, and when was that? What was going on, and what would you go back and say to the younger Saul?
I would say, I mean, the specific day I actually remember because I remember where I was. It was August 14th of 2019. I was at my 12-step meeting, and I remember walking in and angrily yelling about how this girl I was talking to or I was with, like, ratted me out to my girlfriend at the time, that, you know, I was going behind her back and all this. And then I got broken up with, and I'm going to go, like, get revenge on the girl who told on me and so on. And I remember being told, like, to, like, you know, sit down and be quiet and so on. And then I got a text from my, like, girlfriend at the time from her dad that I need to call him. And I said, oh, I'm at this meeting. And he said, no, you need to call me now. And so remember talking to him on the phone, and he was yelling at me and so on. And I was pretty overwhelmed. And I remember going to a gas station and just getting like a 40-ounce like alcohol malt liquor and a Four Loko. And I remember just drinking from both of them, just like sitting in my car crying and thinking, everything is such a mess. I hate this. There's nothing to live for. And I think I reached out to my parents, or they somehow heard from like the girl's parents or something. And my mom offered to come get me. And I said, no, I would just, sober up and go back into the meeting. And, man, I just remember thinking, like it just kind of hit me. Like, how did I end up here? Because it wasn't really anything I had consciously planned out. And I know from a young age, I was never someone who was concerned I was going to use drugs, because none of my family did. None of my friends were some of them smoked weed, but no one was using like hard drugs that I knew of, and it just didn't concern me really. And so to end up being this person in this awful condition, it just was an emotional avalanche there to have that all pile up on me there. And so I think that's really the moment I can think of, back August of 2019, where I realized how bad it all was. But I think at this point, that could have been the best night, because it stopped me from where I was. And I don't think that I'd have any sort of direction or purpose without going through the program I'm in and these experiences, because even before I was really into sports betting, I was just sort of aimlessly going through getting my undergrad degree, and I was getting a communication degree, and I thought, I want to be a sports broadcaster, but didn't really want to take the initiative to try to network and make my way up the rankings with that. And I don't know. Just didn't have much purpose. So I think it's one of those things where I just look back and say, of course, I'm not done with this journey. And I believe that I have this chronic addiction, and if I go on my phone right now and start gambling, then it'll put me back into this destruction. But for now, I'm good, and I think that it's good to be able to celebrate that without getting complacent.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy for you, because I know, having had a sort of similar experience with a different addiction, that it's like, what I know now looking back is that I was living in, like, if I want to use the television metaphor, it was black and white, and now I'm living in color. And it just, the ability to have the relationship with myself that comes with this kind of healing, my quality of life is much better than it ever would have been had I not gone through that. And so, although, obviously what got you to the point where a change like this was necessary is tragic.
Mm-hmm.
This is what happens in life, right? This is how we figure out who we are as human beings. We go through trials and we grow through it, hopefully, and become better people. So good for you, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely been a real weird ride, but it's been a good journey.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do this, Saul. Thanks a lot. And, we have to definitely stay in touch. And if there's anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I was planning to, get
Thanks for listening to the show. Please subscribe, leave a rating or a review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You can learn more about my other podcasts by visiting thepathtooauthenticity.com or by clicking the link in the show notes. Music is by the band Punk Rock Opera, used under a Creative Commons license and with permission from the artist. The show is produced by me, Tom Gentry. You can find more of my work on Substack, including a podcast only available to paid subscribers. So again, thanks for listening. Keep coming back. Be nice.